as the headlines in the paper and the news reports on TV brought more and more attention to the National Guard scandal, the issues around Junior Burkhead and his school term paper for his class got bigger and bigger. The governor had no choice. Called Burkhead in for a meeting. When Burkhead was in the Capitol, the journalists, the press started chasing after him. And he came down almost running into towards my office, and the TV cameras are following him in, and he comes in through the door. I close the door, my office, have him inside, but there's kind of a window in the door, and the TV cameras are up following him, and he's kind of hiding over in a corner. It was incredible scene. I felt so terrible for him to be under this kind of pressure, and finally we waited a moment and made the TV cameras back off from my door, and all of a sudden we pushed the door open and headed into a kind of side door towards the governor's office. The TV cameras coming after us, and I turned around at one point and just put up my hand like this to say, this is as far as you can go. And that night on the evening news, my hand made a special guest appearance there in front of the camera. Anyway, we get in with the governor. The governor's there going through the details. He's asking Burkhead questions. Burkhead's got his checkbook with him, and he's showing instances in the checkbook where he had written in the payments he made to his secretary. See, to show it, oh, she was getting paid by me, not on state time. And the governor's looking at it and said, well, okay, and gives it back to Burkhead. Burkhead leaves, and governor had a habit of, he would go home from the office around 4:30, he'd have dinner, come back at night and work. And he said, come on back tonight. So I'd go home, came back, and he said he went through the checkbook and he found a couple of inconsistencies that made it clear to him that Burkhead was lying. And they had gone back and made entries to make it look like he had paid the secretary. And the governor said, you know, not the original act, it's the cover-up. It's the cover-up. He said, call him to come back. So I call Burkhead. He comes back to the governor's office. It's like 9 o'clock at night, October, starting to get cold out. Bring him in, parks his car, bring him in kind of through the back door. No press there. Into the governor's office. And the governor says to him, I found inconsistencies in your story. I don't believe you've told me the truth, and so I'm relieving you. Burkhead said, I told you the truth. This is honestly what happened. The governor said, I've made my decision. And so I take Burkhead, we walk out of the governor's office. I go out the back door, take him out to where his car is. Standing up there in the Capitol, there's downtown Des Moines in front of us, the lights, and I told him, you know, that was it, and the decision, and he wanted to submit a letter of resignation. He could do that. He'd go back to the regular army. I'd go back inside, talk to the governor, and said, well, we have to have somebody in charge of the National Guard. The National Guard's made up of the Army and the smaller Air Force component. Adjutants General who run the National Guard in each state are usually chosen from the Army, from green suiters as they're called, as opposed to the blue suit Air Force. But we had seen that the National Guard, the Army Guard, had fallen on terrible times. It was at about 56% strength. The leadership was compromised in so many ways, not just Burkhead, but a lot of people below that. And the head of the Air Force Guard, the Air Guard, the blue suiters, was a really tough World War II veteran named Roger Gilbert. I called Gilbert at home, 10:30 at night, and I said, General Gilbert, the governor is appointing you the interim Adjutant General. You are now in charge of the Iowa National Guard. And Gilbert, if you can salute over the phone, did so and said, I will take charge tomorrow. And as he did, and then we would then begin the search for the new permanent leader of the Guard and to begin a healing process. Burkhead was the second Adjutant General to be removed. Before him, another general, Joe May, had been arrested, prosecuted, and sent to jail for misusing military aircraft to transport his girlfriend around. And the Guard had sunk to its lowest possible reputation in Iowa. And we were to begin the process of the rehabilitation on that, and it started on that cool October night when I walked Burkhead out the door and called Roger Gilbert to tell him he was in charge.